Okay, there is a whole lot going on in the AB 1127 and Glock world. There's all kinds of soap opera esque drama and speculation, and where do we go from here? So I wanted to get somebody who's extremely knowledgeable on all the above to come talk to us. And I went directly to Bill Sack. He's an attorney for Second Amendment Foundation. If you are not a member of Second Amendment Foundation, stop this broadcast right now and go become a member. They've done some fantastic work, and Bill Sack is an awesome guy. Not only is he a Second Amendment attorney, but he's also a gun enthusiast. And I think, Bill, I think you're the perfect person to talk to about what's going on with AB 1127, what's going on with Glock, what could be going on in the future, where we are. I think you have enough knowledge from all worlds that it's. I appreciate you coming on and sharing.
Happy to be here. It's good to see you, Mike.
Yeah.
Mike. Good to see you. Okay, so just to bring everybody up to speed, real quick, so Glock. Basically, what happened was the state of California said, "Hey, we think we want to ban Glocks." Essentially, is what they wanted to ban. I mean, state of California wants to ban everything, but this was their opportunity to really sink their teeth into a ban and say, "Hey, Glocks are easily converted into full auto." And there's even an illegal, which is illegal in most cases. There's even a switch that people can make or illegally buy, and that's illegal. And then they can put it on their Glock and illegally make it even more illegal. I mean, the whole thing's illegal, but they decided, hey, you know what? Because you're even able to do that, we want to ban that item. And the way they did it, the AB 1127 doesn't say anything about Glock. It talks about this cruciform part, and it's actually a metal piece in your Glock that is in the shape of a cross. Now the reality is, and I don't think people stop and think about this, and I'll bet you some folks are going to argue with me in the comments, but a Glock is easily converted to a full auto. When they first invented Glock, there was a version of it, a Glock 18, that was meant to be full auto. That's true. But what's also true is just because of that doesn't mean you can ban it, doesn't mean it is bad, doesn't mean that you should make a law against it. That's absolutely ludicrous and ridiculous. But, and I think too often we in the gun owner world allow them to define the argument, and, they kind of draw the box around us, and then we try to argue out of it, and I don't think we should do that. So they passed this law. There were some changes, and the law passed. NRA, Second Amendment Foundation, FPC said, fine, we have a lawsuit ready to go. But then Glock threw everybody a curveball, and we still don't have all the details on exactly what's going on. But Glock came out and said, hey, you know what? Gen 3, 4, and 5, they're all going away. And we're going to replace it with Gen V, which I've since found is actually Roman numeral 5. So it's actually they've kind of the Gen 3 and 4 and whatever, that was kind of semi-official. It wasn't real. Glock didn't come up with that. It was kind of, Glock owners came up with it, and Glock kind of adopted it. So I think they're trying to take it back, and say, hey, these are, Gen V, Glock version V, Roman numeral 5. Anyway, so what we want to talk about, Bill, is where does that leave us? Where are we with the lawsuit, and what are your thoughts? Maybe, I know that's a really broad question, but I've been talking for too long. So lay it on us, man. Where are we at with this?
So we can start. Yeah, I guess a little bit let's start at the beginning. Okay, so AB 1127 created a new called machine gun convertible pistols, I think was what they called it. And the basic argument is what you laid out, which is that certain handguns are too easily converted into fully automatic. They created this new definition, which includes it has to have a cruciform trigger bar, and it has to have a user replaceable backplate that's easy to
swap
such that you can put some sort of a conversion device on the back of it. And we all know what they were aiming at. They were aiming at Glock pistols. because there are, book reps which that you could buy on the dark web, official made ones, these things like that. Basic argument was that they're easily convertible into machine guns, and therefore we have to make them double super secret illegal because, as you rightly pointed out, converting a gun to automatic without the appropriate licensure and regulatory hurdles is already illegal, and the conversion devices are largely illegal, and putting them together is illegal, and then, doing gangland murder with them is also illegal. But if all of that is not sufficient to deter crime, let's take the gun that you can do all of those illegal things to, and then with, which are already illegal, and make those illegal. It's as asinine and convoluted as it sounds, and yet here we are. So this kind of is a good way to think about it, is to think about one of our other cases, which is challenging the Unsafe Handgun Act in California. Everybody knows it as the handgun roster, which created a number of other requirements that guns have to have in order to be legal for sale in California. We got an injunction in that case, preventing enforcement. The holding being that it was like unconstitutional. That is now up on appeal in the Ninth Circuit. And so, having dealt the blow that a large chunk of the California roster requirements were likely unconstitutional, rather than back and contemplate, what they did was they be California legislators. They doubled down and all of them to include the most popular in the country. So clearly they have and are in less continuing to vote there, and them signed the bill late on Friday. We were ready at the courtroom steps on Monday morning to file our lawsuit.
Which awesome job. And where did you guys know? I mean, was there any communication from Glock? Now, I remember back in April, we actually did an episode where Glock said, hey, we're going to discontinue a bunch of models. And we talked about it. And honestly, I didn't see a whole lot of chatter about that, but we did a whole episode on it. So it's not like it was a, super secret, but they did announce, and I don't know, coincidentally or not, they did announce, hey, starting November 1st, no more Gen 3, 4, 5, to distributors. They told the distributors, hey, no more of these. We're going to come out with this new Gen V. Did Glock communicate that with you guys, or was that were you blindsided? And how does it affect the lawsuit? Or
so to answer your question, we found out about Gen V. You're right, by the way, is super dumb. Going from Gen 5 to Gen Roman numeral 5, just as a rabbit hole, when Beretta came out with the 92, not the 92, but the 90-2. You remember that gun? It was like the 92 that had melted. And so they had the 92 and the 92. Anyway, that's an aside. So no, we found out when everybody else did that this V conversion or whatever it's going to be, V updating, is going to be a thing. You found out when the Glock store thing leaked and everything else did, just like everybody else. Exactly what the details of it are and how it's going to affect the case are still very much unknown. We're attempting the back channel communication just to get some more information, and obviously I can't share any of that, but I can share that we don't have a lot of the answers that we're looking for as of the filming of this Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, I guess if the Cruciform is being removed in this new version, then that essentially would make that law null and void, and then there wouldn't be a lawsuit that you would be able to associate with it? Or could you still have a lawsuit, there just wouldn't be firearms being produced that qualify?
Right, great question.
Law?
So the thinking is that presumably what Gen V is is an adjustment to the fire control system such that it doesn't use a cruciform trigger bar and would then evade this new definition that's been created. I think the official information that came out about Gen V also said something about minor slide changes, probably to the way that the backplate works. But that's all speculative. Nobody really knows yet. Nobody's seen the thing. So, right, theoretically, anyway, it would make sense, given the timing of all of this, that what they're trying to do is make the guns such that they, one, evade the definition, and two, just don't work with commonly available but largely illegal conversion switches. Now, in terms of what that means for the lawsuit, that is a more complicated question. But once we know more of these details, what we ultimately will need to reckon with from a legal perspective is, are there going to be guns, and to what extent are there going to be guns that are going to be affected by the, if Glock is changing all of their stuff, then the vast majority of the inventory would in theory no longer be affected. But there are lots of other kind of nitty-gritty details that we would need to work out and figure out if they would be otherwise available in California anyway, whether there's going to be a Gen V version of Gen 3, because Gen 3 are the only Glock pistols that are on the roster. So it doesn't matter if you change a Gen 5 to a Gen 5/V, now it's still just going to have the roster preventing it from being available in California. So there's still a lot of unanswered questions in terms of practicality of, are these guns ever going to see California, and what that means for the lawsuit. Hopefully we'll get some more answers early next week, and we'll make adjustments if necessary.
I find it hilarious that Gen 3s are the only ones on the roster when Gen 5 makes it more difficult for people to convert them to automatic firearms. Like, that was part of the design change going from Gen 3 through Gen 4 and Gen 5, was that it is trickier to do to a Gen 5 than it was to do to a Gen 3.
Picture Gavin Newsom shaking his fist.
Right.
Why don't they make this more difficult? And Glock's like, we did 5 years ago.
Well,
Yes.
There's an interesting thing that I haven't seen a lot of people put together, and there were a lot of changes to AB 1127, and one of the things included in AB 1127 was, and I'm going to paraphrase, but essentially, if you fix your product and no longer have a cruciform piece in there, we will, as long as it's done by the end of 2026, we'll fast track your product back onto the roster, and you don't even have to comply with the other roster crap. As long as you go in and change that cruciform part, then boom, you can go right back into business, and you don't have to have the other things that the roster requires. First off, Bill, did I explain that sufficiently and accurately?
Glock Gen 3 is not on the roster because it meets all of the requirements of the roster. Glock Gen 3 is on the roster because it was grandfathered in. So what they did with the amendment was they said, look, if you part of the firing control mechanism and or the slide such that it doesn't meet the definition that we just created out of thin air, a convertible pistol, then we will allow it back in. We'll basically allow you to keep your grandfather status, but with the updated trigger bar, essentially. That's what the amendment is. And so that's why, to answer the question from a couple minutes ago, like, is there going to be a Gen 3 with a new trigger bar and or slide plate assembly, is the question that we don't know an answer to yet, and is one of the largest outstanding questions as to what would be available in California, even if the trigger bar question were fixed. Like, if they're only fixing Gen 5, then problem still remains that Glocks are not going to be available for sale in California. If whatever they do to the fire control unit also can be applied to Gen 3, and they are continuing to make Gen 3, then they will roster or be allowed to get back from the roster when it were fixed and go around that new machine gun convertible pistol definition if they don't have the combination of the Cruciform trigger bar and the back blade that these are replaceable. These are all the things that we don't know, but yeah, it's a little bit of 4D chess trying to understand it all.
It and there's a couple of, it's almost like a choose your own adventure book, you know what I mean? One thought that I had was, I'll bet you Glock met with California, you know, and I'll bet you there was some kind of discussion, and that's why that made it into the bill, and Glock was already planning on doing this because, like I said, back in April they already said, hey, we're going to discontinue some of these models and whatever.
Yeah. But
the other part of this is where I think there may still be a struggle and a fight and a lawsuit is I definitely get the feeling that Glock is trying to kind of clean up their inventory and maybe even go so far. Like right now they have, you know, 2 different sized slides that for a 45, you know, like one's a little bit slimmer than the you know, the 30 is a little bit fatter than the, you know what I mean? It feels like, and then like a 26X is similar to a, you know, I think this could possibly be their opportunity to just kind of clean up their product line. Now, if they do that though, like you said, if they change it too much, then I think the struggle and the conflict will be California saying, nope, if all you did was get rid of that Cruciform part, then we'd put you back on the roster. But you did more than that. Therefore, now you have to have all these ridiculous other things. And Glock's going, well, we're not doing the ridiculous other things. And that might be a fight. I don't know. Or maybe California, for once in their existence, will in good faith, just
take
say,
the win.
Yeah,
Take
just
the
be like,
win.
all right, great, whatever. But I don't know. So is that a possibility though? Like if Glock goes too far, do you see California saying, that's too much, that's more than we said, and therefore we're gonna stab you in the back, and we're not gonna let you sell your product here in California, and then you got a lawsuit again.
I mean, all things are possible. Honestly, I have no idea.
This is all speculative. By the way, Bill, this is just for everybody listening. A lot of this is so much speculation. I think it's just a way for us to reveal some of the things that are happening. Like, I don't think a lot of people realize there was that section in AB 1127 that would help them fast track it. So now we're just kind of speculating. We don't know. We got to wait for everything to come out. I'm watching people have meltdowns that Glocks are totally different now, and why would they commit suicide, whatever. Everyone just relax, and but there are some possibilities. There are some avenues that that are worth some speculation. So
no,
we're not going to hold you to anything,
so,
Bill. I promise.
I mean, when we look at the stuff that was discontinued, right? That was announced, I don't know, a month ago or so, and it's on Block's website. Like, that's not a secret. The list of things that are discontinued, including my beloved 34. And the 17L, which is a shame. Hopefully they bring them back. But what was not on the discontinued list were the most popular Gen 3 things that presumably would have otherwise remained available in California. Like Gen 319 was not discontinued. Gen 317 was not discontinued. Gen 326 was not discontinued on that list. Right. So a bunch of things were cleaned up. And I think you're right. Like a lot of things didn't, just kind of from a business perspective, make sense anymore, to have things that were overly complicated. I mean, on Gen 5, they had like 3 different ways to make a 17, like they had the 49 slide, and then the 47, and then the 17, like they were all the same gun. So some of it, I think it was just a streamlining of their SKU list. I think that, I mean, again, this is just Bill Sass, the gun owner and Glock nerd, not gun lawyer speaking. Whether or not they were talking to California as this law was going through, I don't know. It's entirely possible. I mean, this bill is not the only piece of legislation and litigation that's out there on this Glock switch issue. There are other jurisdictions in other states that are either suing or looking to pass laws about, the ease by which you can convert Glocks into machine guns. So it's something that they, again, speculating, may have perceived as just a legal liability thing that like it's easy enough to the trigger bar so it's a different shape.
Fix.
Like if we can stamp the trigger bars so they're straight instead of fine, and if they do the same thing, you know what I mean? Like as soon as AB 1127 came out, the first thing I did was rip my 49 apart, which is in my desk drawer, and look at the performance trigger, because I have the stupid performance trigger in mind, and see like, wait, does that have a cruciform trigger bar? Maybe they'll just defer the performance triggers and everything. But they think it's X shaped enough that I think it probably doesn't meet the mold. But again, as Bill Sack the Glock nerd, is Glock going to change more than what California allows? I don't know. Has Glock changed anything from Gen 1 until Gen 5? If there's anything that I
finger
know about,
grooves, right?
it's that they don't like changing anything ever. So I would assume, again, just kind of half jokingly, tongue in cheek, that if the goal is to get themselves so that they can get back on the roster, that they would be working with presumably the DOJ to make sure that they're doing that in a way productive. Again, that's just
to guess.
They definitely are. As far as
Yeah.
as far as companies go, they're the least team player. I don't want to put it into a negative, but they're kind of just their own. They're like
I respect them for it.
They just kind of do their own thing.
I do, and I respect them for it.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess I wish they'd like communicate with not just their customers, but with Second Amendment Foundation and what, you know what I mean? They don't seem to really
I imagine there's got to be a reason, though. I got to give them respect of they've been around for a long time. They know what they're doing, and if they're not saying things, there's got to be a reason.
Well,
I got to imagine that it's a good thing, and there's going to be a benefit, and it's going to work out fine.
When your company's motto is your company's name plus the word perfection,
Right.
I think that the reason is arrogance is what I think it is. But anyway.
Well, I don't know. I think that no matter what, people are going to be upset about whatever Glock had done,
Yeah.
right? Like I see people melting down about, they're trying to get around this unconstitutional law. They're pro gun law, gun control, whatever. Like I see people jumping to all these conclusions. We have to remember that Glock originally decided that they weren't going to put magazine disconnects in guns. People didn't like that. They were like, well, they just don't want to do this thing that would get them on the roster. People are never going to be happy. Now they're doing something allegedly, hopefully, to get around this AB 1127. People don't like that either. They're like, oh, now they're basically letting the government get away with this. At the end of the day, this was a liability for Glock, too. I don't think Glock likes that their guns are the criminals', selection of choice for gang crime and stuff because of Glock switches. And you do see, Glock switches being used in gang violence. And so I'm sure for Glock, this has been a long time in the making. They probably knew the writing was on the wall for years that this was eventually going to be a problem. I don't view this as them, being okay with these overreaching gun laws. I view this as them doing what's best for their business, and no matter what they did or didn't do, people wouldn't be happy about it.
Well, and I think there's pure speculation, but there's another part that I touched on earlier. The first time I ever shot a Glock was 1991, and that was before anybody else in the room here was born. I know. So
Thank you.
But I remember back in the early 90s, the idea was late 80s, early 90s, but the idea was that they wanted to take market share from Uzi and from Mac 10. Like it was a very real thing that, hey, we made this automatic pistol, but it can be semi-automatic, and it just never took off. The Glock 18 is kind of a footnote in history. No one's buying it. No military is using it, anything like that. So it's almost like, look, it's no sweat off our nose to redesign this thing, because it was originally designed to be this full auto, and semi-auto. So all right, let's redesign it so it's only full or semi-auto, or at least, it's in compliance with these states. and clean up their SKU, like Bill said, and kind of streamline their product line. I mean, this is they haven't changed anything in decades. This seems like a good opportunity to say, hey, you know what? Their patents have run out, and people are starting to clone them. I mean, they kind of got to do something.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of high quality handguns that have come out that people are. I mean, it used to be 15 years ago. I mean, geez, man, there was a time for about 10, 15 years, Glock was everything. And people were kind of transitioning away from 1911s, even Berettas. Berettas were, people were all excited about them. But about 10, 15 years, Glock was everything. And then, SIG starts, taking over and some other handguns. So I don't know. I think they're such a business, maybe even more so. Like, you look at like Daniel Defense. Daniel Defense has these commercials that are very patriotic and they're about self-defense and whatever. Glock's a business. Like, they're running a business, So this just all feels like a business decision. And probably, I hope in the end, it's a really good one, because I'm a fan of all the gun organizations and all the gun manufacturers. So I hope it works out for them. So anyway, I got a little long-winded there. Bill, what else do we need to know about AB 1127 and SAF and this whole situation? Is there anything else you want to add? Because I want to talk about the school search gun owner thing before we leave. Anything else
no,
you want to
I
touch
covered
on
the
AB
Glock ban pretty
1127?
well. I mean, the only thing I think I'll leave on this issue is just, keep apprised of our social media. We're on X, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. When we know more, you'll know more.
Good. So, okay, so get us up to date on. Apparently, there was a gun owner at a high school who lost the ability to their Fourth Amendment rights because they found out they were a gun owner or something. Bring us up to date on that.
Yeah,
that
so this is another fascinating case that we filed just last week. The case is called Harrington, and it's out of New Hampshire. And the case involves a young man named Jack Harrington, who at that time was a high school senior, 18 years old. And Jack is a lawful gun owner. He has a handgun, and he sometimes keeps his handgun in his truck so he can keep his gun with him. New Hampshire is I forget if they call it a constitutional carry or permitless carry per their laws up there. But in any event, he carries the gun, he keeps it with him in his truck sometimes, lawfully, in compliance with all state and federal laws. And one day on the school bus going to, I think, baseball practice, he was telling some friends of his about how he had been pulled over for some minor traffic infraction or something, that had told the police officer that he had his gun with him in the truck. And the cop was super cool about it. He had a great interaction with the police officer. I don't even know if he got a ticket. But the point of the story was, I was kind of nervous because I had my gun with me and the cop was super cool about it and it was a non-issue, and isn't that great? So a week or two later, apparently that story percolated up through the school administration, and they pulled Jack. And they said to him,
Out of class.
Jack, we heard that you're a gun owner. We heard that you own a gun. And he said, uh-huh. And they said, we heard that you keep it. And he said,
With you sometimes.
and they said, we want to search your truck. And he says, no. I don't ever bring it to school because I know that it's unlawful to do. I keep my gun with me and carry my gun legally outside of school, but I never bring it here, and never have said that I would or have. And they demanded that they search this young man's truck. They harassed him at length, and I think it was the vice principal's office, in like a 3-on-1 haranguing of the poor guy. He repeatedly said, no, you don't have consent to search anything. Pounds. Well, they searched the truck anyway, and they found nothing, because he doesn't bring his gun to school because he knows it's unlawful to do that. And when he's at school, his gun is locked up at home in accordance with all local, state, and federal laws. So the point of the story is that you cannot use the fact that somebody exercises their Second Amendment right as ground to search their vehicle. Now, in the school context, it's a lower hurdle than for you and me to be searched in our private capacity, which would be probable cause. You know, the police have to have probable cause that a crime has been committed in order to search you. They need to have a warrant or probable cause in some other context. At the school level, it's a lower hurdle. It's reasonable suspicion. But even still, simply saying, hey, we heard that you own a gun outside of school is not reasonable suspicion that you've committed a crime. It's only evidence that you executed. And so relying solely on the knowledge that this young man was a gun owner cannot be constitutional grounds to search. They chose to do so anyway. And so this new lawsuit is going to make clear, hopefully, that simply being a gun owner and choosing to exercise of your fundamental right is not justification for law enforcement or other authorities to trample on your Fourth Amendment rights.
Awesome. That's awesome. That's fantastic. I am really excited about Second Amendment Foundation and what you guys are doing. You know, you guys have this really great, rich history, and it just feels like the last few years that there's been a spark that's turned into an inferno, and you guys are lighting it up, man. You guys are doing a great job with all your lawsuits. You guys are super supportive of Gun Owners Radio and San Diego County gun owners, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. And I loved Gun Rights Policy Conference in Utah, and I'm looking forward to next year. So please thank the whole crew and everything that you guys do, and phenomenal job. Anything else? Anything else you want to touch on?
No, I guess I'll just say, thanks for having us. Thank you for the support. I mean, both you personally and San Diego County gun owners have been such a great partner on multiple cases and just on all things California gun law. I always know that if I have a question about a bill that's being circulated or talked about, I can call Mike and get the down low on if the thing's going to pass or what I need to know. It was great to meet you finally and shake your hand at GRPC. And we are in the process of deciding, like, right now where GRPC next year is going to be. So if you have a book.
You give us a hint, or what? Are there some?
I think it's still pretty wide open. So if you guys have a vote, I'm pushing for Tahiti. I think West Florida would be nice.
Well, it's going to be like Tahiti, Alabama, or something like that. I don't know. I heard. What do you think? What do you think, Dakota?
You know, I always go back and forth between a gun-friendly place and a gun-not-friendly place, because we talk about this sometimes. But when you live in a place that's not very pro-gun, I feel like the people there are a little bit more invested in making change and working hard about pro-Second Amendment stuff. But I also don't want to be spending my money in a cesspool like Chicago. So, like, it's this like catch-22. Do you want it in a pro-gun place or not so much?
Alicia, what do you think?
Well, I think attendance is better when you're in a pro-gun state. Because if you look at, I will tell you, there's a lot of people like we hadn't seen any, like, nah, I can't bring my gun.
Right,
I'm not going. I'm all about a pro-gun state is where I'm at. So,
well, I'd rather spend my money in pro-gun states, so that works.
Yeah.
Well, we're actually going to announce a scholarship program. We're going to try to fund a bunch of activists from San Diego to go to the next GRPC, just because it was so valuable. So I don't care where it is. We're going to get people there. We're going to go and we're going to enjoy it. So can't wait for the announcement.
Yeah. Right on.
All right, Bill. Bill Sack from Second Amendment Foundation. If you're not a member, become a member. Thanks a lot for your time, man.
Thank you. Good to see you guys.
Hey, thanks for watching Gun Owners Radio. I hope you loved that clip. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and follow us on social media. And check out our website at gunownersradio.com.